We're going to talk about building something on a blockchain. And the reason I want to talk to Dieter about this is that he built something on a blockchain. He and his colleagues built something on a blockchain that a lot of people use. And that's not very common. Dieter, we just saw a stat. How many transactions so far?
2.8 million transactions
right.
With the CryptoKitties smart contract.
That may be the single smart contract with the most transactions ever in the history of the blockchain business. So that's pretty amazing.
It's kind of nuts. People do love those cats.
So the thing I want to talk about is building on a blockchain. Let's start with this. As a developer, what do you get when you build on a blockchain that you don't get from any other technology that's out there?
You know what's funny, Fred, is that as a developer, you don't get a ton. You kind of get like free financial transactions, but you know, Square, Stripe are pretty good at that. I think the cool thing is it's what your users get. So there's never been a situation before where any software product, any software team has been able to deliver value to customers that would outlive the team that created it, especially in this age of software as a service. And with decentralized platforms, with things like CryptoKitties, it will be the case that if anyone anywhere is running an Ethereum node in 100 years, that those cats will still exist, and your descendants will be able to prove, if they have your keys, that they still own those cats. And no one else will be able to sell them, to breed them, or prove ownership of them. Okay,
but what you get is you get the ability to make an application like that for your users.
100%. I mean, at the end of the day, the job of a software company is to deliver value to users. And the fact that blockchain lets us deliver this value that we really can't build, we can't build any kind of infrastructure like that individually that would ensure that. But decentralized platforms allow us to create that kind of value for people.
You also get something else, which I didn't even really understand. When we made our investment in CryptoKitties, I don't think I actually understood this. I understand it now.
I think I know what you're saying, and I don't think we understood it back then either.
You are building something that can be a platform for other developers, right? 100%. I didn't get that.
We didn't see it until after it happened. So the story is kitty hats, and if you play CryptoKitties at all, you have to check out Kitty Hats. It's this amazing team of just 3 people, and they decided that they needed to dress up their cats. And so because of the nature of blockchain, they could build an entire product on top of CryptoKitties that allowed them to sell tokens independent of us on their own website. And then they can, a user, once they purchase a token, can assign that token to their cat. And so the user owns the cat, but the cat owns the hat. And if you sell your cat, the hat goes with it, and that hat is the permanent property of that cat from then on. And it was this amazing win-win-win situation where this team was able to create a product that they could profit off of by selling these tokens. Our users who had cats were creating value for themselves because dressing up cats is hilariously fun. And guess what? They made our ecosystem stronger and made our ecosystem more valuable. And they couldn't screw up the cats, right? One way to think about it is that everything about our smart contract is locked into the blockchain, and so our API can never change. And so they have this absolute certainty that we can't ever pull the rug out from under them the way Twitter might.
So if you wanted to make your own kitty hats application, and you wanted to shut down their kitty hats application because you wanted people to use your kitties hat application, you can't do that.
We can't. Now, we could promote ours on top of other people, and obviously we have the audience advantage, but we can't stop anyone from creating anything on top. We've got Kitty Racing is out. Lots of people like that one. There's 4 different kitty battle games coming out, so it'll be interesting to see which one of those is the most fun. But I think this idea of entire groups of companies or individuals creating experiences on top of experiences is fascinating. It starts to get nuts when you think like, well, what if somebody built, Kitty Wars that is built on top of Kitty Battles, which is built on top of CryptoKitties, right?
Right. So is that true of any application that's built on a blockchain? So let's imagine a different application. Let's imagine that I make a game to allow my friends to play fantasy football, okay? And I make it on top of the blockchain. Does that mean that somebody could make a game on top of that? Just because it's built on the blockchain? Like, are all applications, all dApps, extensible by somebody else? Is that like a fundamental property of a dApp?
They're extensible by default. So it would have been possible for us to say, like, you can't breed your CryptoKitties unless you have a token from us that proves that we authorize it. I think that's against the nature of decentralized apps, right? And so I don't think we would ever do that. And I don't think anyone who wants to succeed in this space would ever do that, because then if you want that level of control, just do it on your own servers. But yes, so fundamentally, unless you go to extraordinary efforts to subvert the platform is going to create that openness and extensibility for any app built on top of it.
So developers get built-in money. Now, you're saying that that's not that big of a deal?
It's important, and it's a big deal. It's a huge deal, but everyone in this room understands it. And so I usually, when I'm talking to people, I'm trying to share with them the things that are surprising. Right. So yes, it is a big deal, and the fact that we were able to launch an app and that we didn't have to worry about things like double spend or credit card fraud or things like that. Like, it was a great relief off of our development team. So I don't want to undersell that. It's just something that I think people in this room really understand. And those other things were much more surprising to us.
So built-in money, the ability to make applications that give users things that they can't get in any other technology environment, and extensibility in a sense that your game can become a platform that other people can build upon. Those are three pretty big deals.
I think so.
Okay, so let's talk about the hassles of building on a blockchain, right? Like, what are the things that you all ran into? I mean, the most obvious one is the scalability question. That's the one that everybody knows about because the media has picked up on it. We can talk about that, but give us some other things that are really challenging.
Well, the scalability thing, I mean, it's not surprising, but I think most people don't appreciate how slow the blockchain is. People think of it as, the world computer, the supercomputer. It's actually slightly less powerful than an Apple IIe, which is a computer released in 1983. And by the way, you didn't have to timeshare that with 10,000 other people.
When you say that, are you specifically speaking about Ethereum, or are you specifically speaking about all existing smart contract platforms that are out there?
It's almost the same thing. But yes, that is Ethereum. That computation is based on Ethereum. So it's way slower than I think most people appreciate. And so, I mean, that's important to note. The other things that were really surprising, well, not surprising, we knew this sort of news was happening, but it's funny to think about. Like, I think we might be the first game in history that most of our players have to go through KYC before they play the first time. Right. Because how else are you going to get Ether? There's a huge onboarding effort of getting MetaMask installed or downloading Toshi or something similar. So the onboarding flow is really brutal.
But that's actually a problem for your users, right?
100%.
Now, was it challenging for you and your colleagues to implement that connectivity to other Ethereum wallets, or was that relatively easy to do?
It was relatively straightforward. I think that those tools can be refined, but that was fine. The actual Solidity development tools are fairly immature. It's still early days. I mean, I think early C compilers weren't any better, so we'll get there. There's really no good tools for testing and debugging, and so we ended up having to do a lot of sort of manual, like, we'll put the code in this mode so we can test it, and then manually edit the code, because when we actually release it to the public chain, we don't want that code in there that's validating certain assumptions. So that was kind of a pain. What else?
How about smart contracts? People tell me that building smart contracts is challenging because if you have a bug in them, it's an attack vector and someone could blow you up. Like, were you anxious when you put CryptoKitties out in the world that there was some vulnerability that you hadn't figured out?
We were terrified. It's funny because it actually, all the team members are much younger than I am, and for me it was like going old days, right? Like back in the days of like burning software on a CD and sending it to be, a million copies to be printed, right? Like you tested the crap out of that thing. It wasn't ship it and fix it tomorrow. And so it was kind of a throwback to those days. I guess one thing, and if anyone's developing smart contracts here, watch for an upcoming blog post. I have this notion of like ratcheting maturity, where you release a smart contract and you give yourself some flexibility to change some things about it, but then you actually have it built into the smart contract that you can take those permissions away from yourself. And I wish we had done something like that. So we actually have a pause button in the worst case. If the smart contract's going off the rails, we can pause it. But we have no way to prove to our customers that we won't pause it now that we know that it's solid. And if we had put that sort of ratcheting mechanism in there, I think we could have done something like that.
You think the next collectible experience you and your colleagues make will have that kind of... like what you're saying is there's a period of time where we want to be able to debug this thing, after which we will, just not touch it anymore.
Yeah, and it's interestingly enough, it's less about bugs. Like bugs are sort of binary. Like you can have a bunch of eyes look at it and say, well, this isn't doing what you expect it to do. But some things like the probability that certain traits pop out, or the breeding times, or things that before you have users, you don't really know what the right values for that is. And so because we wanted to encode that stuff in the smart contract, we didn't have any flexibility to tweak it. And I think we could have structured our smart contract in a way that let us tweak that for the first 2 weeks or so, right, and then remove that ability from ourselves in a provable way that all the users could see, oh, okay, the first 2 weeks was sort of a beta, they can tweak things like the probabilities of traits, but after that period of time, then that stuff's locked down.
So when you look around at all of the smart contract projects that are out there, what are the things that excite you that you see coming to market in the next 6, 12 months as a developer, as somebody who's building on these smart contract platforms? What are you saying, damn, I can't wait for that?
Well, honestly, it's not even the smart contract stuff. It's the infrastructure around it.
That's what I mean. I'm saying smart contract platforms. I'm talking about all the way down to the chain.
Right.
I'm talking about the various blockchain projects out there that will support smart contracts.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that there's a lot of people that are trying to solve that onboarding problem better. One of the hardest parts with crypto onboarding is key storage. So, anybody who's downloaded a wallet knows that it throws a scary splash screen in your face and says, write down these words, or your dog will die. Like, it's super intimidating. And I think that there's got to be a more consumer focused approach to that. So fortunately, I've talked to some teams down here that are thinking along those lines. So hopefully that's a problem that'll get solved. And just the idea that you have to go through KYC to buy a small amount of these assets to do something like gaming. You can play CryptoKitties for well under $50, and the idea that you can't just give us your credit card and start playing the game the way you can a million other games is kind of bonkers. So that infrastructure is coming. Again, we've talked to some people that are trying to help with that. So those are the things I'm most excited about. I'm also really excited to see what happens when people create other entertainment experiences that aren't just clones of what we've done. So, like we had some great success. It's not surprising that other people want to either just copy it because of cash grab or because they genuinely want to iterate on our idea and improve it. But what I really want to see is people who are thinking about blockchain gaming and thinking about entertainment experiences that that contain that element of true ownership, that have the opportunity for extensibility and longevity, and but come at it from a completely different direction, where it's it's not just breedable objects. Maybe it's a card game. Maybe it's some kind of racing game. I don't know what it might be, but I think there's the space of gaming is much bigger than breedable cats, and I think that much more of that space can and should be covered by blockchain integration. So I'm really excited to see what other people are able to do there.
Do you think that digital collectibles, non-fungible tokens, and gaming is all sort of the same thing, or do you think that gaming is one important, maybe primary use case for non-fungible tokens, but there are others as well?
One of the use cases for non-fungible tokens that I'm thinking a lot about, I'm talking to some people about, is this idea of something you earn that proves some sort of status about you. So you can imagine that you go to a Kanye concert and you get a token at that concert that only people who are physically at that concert can get. And if I can then display that on social media in some way, in a cryptographically verifiable fashion, then I think that's a strong social signal. And you can imagine that if I get 10 of those, that I can get the golden version, and suddenly that's an even stronger signal. And and you can extend that idea to more serious things like degrees, accreditations, citizenship even. But I mean, we're starting. We always have the consumer mindset when we're thinking on our team, and so I think that idea of I was just talking to someone today, and we were talking about the importance of music, and I remember the days of when you'd go into somebody's house, and then one of the first things you'd do is look at their CD collection, and that said a lot about them.
In my day, you would look at their vinyl collection.
There you go. And now we all have the same collection of music. It's called Spotify,
right.
And so I think that when you democratize access to everything, then no one has their individuality. And I think that this idea of non-fungible tokens that are individual and personalizable can be a form of digital self-expression that is much more meaningful than anything we've seen before.
I want to just talk a little bit about non-fungible tokens, because I think it's actually a very important subsector of the crypto space. I think most people understand that, but exactly what is meant. So for those who might not know, describe what a non-fungible token is and why it's different than another kind of a token.
Well, fungibility is actually the weirder concept.
That's what I want.
Yeah, so money and shares are fungible in the sense that if I have a $5 bill and it's all banged up, scratched up, I can go to the bank and get a brand new one, right? You can't do that with a T-shirt. And so when we think about money, we know that all that matters is the amount. It doesn't matter which bills you have. And that's what's meant by fungibility. But most things in life are non-fungible, right? Like you and I are non-fungible. Like our wives would be very surprised if the wrong guy came home. And so maybe pleasantly, I don't know. But but interestingly enough, because Bitcoin started with the concept of money, and that was the problem that Satoshi was trying to solve, everyone was thinking in terms of fungible tokens, and money-like entities, share-like entities. And when we wanted to create CryptoKitties, and we wanted, again, this idea of individual ownership and having a connection with an individual cat and not just some sort of numbers game, then it was really important for us to develop non-fungible tokens in a manner similar to things like ERC-20 that were managing fungible tokens.
Right. Okay, so I want to talk about ERC-721, but before we get there, was the concept of a non-fungible token around in the crypto space for some period of time, or is this were people talking about non-fungible tokens 3 or 4 years ago?
No, and in fact, I am exceedingly proud of the fact that you use that phrase so naturally, because there was a period of a couple of days where we were like, what can we call this thing? Like, what do we call it? And the non-fungible token was a term that we started using internally. Do you think
it's a good term? Like, I don't think my mom would understand what a non-fungible token means. No, it does sound a little geeky. Like, would the industry be well served if we came up with a more sort of mainstream nomenclature for this?
I sat down with the thesaurus and tried to find something, and the problem is that the words that we use for that concept is so commonplace because most of the things in the world are non-fungible. So you end up with words like thing, object, item, right? Like, so unfortunately, because of the word token and because of the background, we felt that at least for the community, and maybe outside the community, we'll find out better words. I mean, we call them cats, so maybe that'll stick. But so non-fungible tokens was this idea that we generalized it. So there were a couple of projects that actually launched before CryptoKitties, most notably CryptoPunks. And they had this notion of individual art items that you could buy. And with CryptoPunks, the only sort of interesting action you can take is to own them or to sell them. There was no sort of mechanic where you could do anything else with them, the way you can breed CryptoKitties. And I took a look at their smart contract to try and figure out what the best way to sort of generalize the concept of non-fungibility was. But I feel like no one was really thinking about it as a widespread concept to any deep degree. Like there were a few rumors here and there where people were talking about real estate assets and how those would be different from coins, but no one really seemed to sort of, I guess, draw the comparison between cats, punks, and home deeds.
So when you decided to do ERC 721, did you come up with that concept all on your own, or was there like a group of collaborators?
So that was the idea of formalizing it. That was me. It was. ERC 20 was super popular at that point in time, and so the first thought was, well, how do we make these things ERC 20 compliant? And I actually had to tell like 3 or 4 people in a row, like, no, we can't do that. And before I even came up with the idea, I was like, well, wait a minute, why shouldn't there be some other standard? But yeah, no, I mean, we talked about it internally. Like I came up with the idea, and then we talked about it internally, and then I wrote that. But yeah, that idea of making it something that was an industry standard. Wasn't immediately obvious to us, but I think it was well worth doing.
And do you think that every smart contract platform that emerges should have something like ERC 721 built on top of it, or do you think that maybe people will actually build them with the concept of non-fungible tokens native in the platform, like they'll ship it with that built in?
I think what makes non-fungible tokens interesting is their individuality. And so it's never going to be the case where you can say this is what a non-fungible token is. You'll have to say this is the minimum functionality that a non-fungible token has to have. But if that's all the functionality it has, it's not a very interesting NFT. And so, in the same way that our cats have images and have the ability to breed and have a full genome, I think any interesting NFT is always going to have another layer on top of that. And so I think it is going to have some sort of specification like that where, yes, this is how you treat them generically, but specifically they're going to be much richer than that.
But I want to go back to that question because I don't know if I asked it right because I didn't get the answer I was looking for. Do we think that the specification of a non-fungible token is going to be something that every smart contract platform will have to have going forward? Like this is going to become a minimum requirement of a smart contract platform that it can support non-fungible tokens.
I think that's correct.
The market will demand it.
I think so. I think there's too many interesting use cases for having a class of goods that are a collection but aren't fungible, can't be grouped together just represented as a balance. You have to keep track of each one individually.
Got it. All right, so we got 5 minutes left. I would like to come back to CryptoKitties for a minute because I do think it's worth talking a little bit about that. CryptoKitties was shipped when?
We had a sort of limited beta release at the end of November, and then I think December 3rd was the official launch date.
So CryptoKitties has been in the wild for
almost 6 months. Exactly.
Almost 6 months now, and while the initial sort of mania has come and gone, it's still being used a lot, right?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of knew that this being the crypto space, that we were going to get a bump and then a drawdown of users. And one of the big challenges for us as a team was to say, well, how do we keep this from just being a fad? How do we keep this from being something that's engaging? And I think the real secret to that was continually releasing new content. And so, you know, every week we're releasing new traits. Some of those traits are, you know, released in a visible way, so you can just go and buy a cat that has that. But I think even more fun, there's a bunch of traits that we release that if you have to breed the cats, you have to buy multiple cats, you have to breed them together in certain combinations before you can manifest those traits.
So like games, most games have sort of like a life cycle, right? Where people are obsessed with Angry Birds for a while, or people are obsessed with Bejeweled for a while, or whatever it is, and then they kind of fade. Do you expect that digital collectible experiences like CryptoKitties will exhibit that behavior, or do you think it's going to be more like it'll go on forever, that CryptoKitties, individual people may come and go out of the experience, but the experience will be sustained by some user base forever and ever?
I think before we launched, I would have almost certainly said that, yeah, you'll launch it, a bunch of people will come in, they'll play it for a year or two, and then they'll go and find something else. The kitty hats experience, the kitty racing experience, that makes me think that there's no reason to stop building new experiences with those same assets. We have a community. We have people who understand what it means to own a cat, who understand how to breed cats together. And so, I mean, it's our intention to release new experiences on top of CryptoKitties. It sure seems to be the intention of other people to do so. And so I see no reason why, you know, we sometimes say internally why maybe, you know, December, when we stop releasing new cats, that's actually the beginning of the CryptoKitties experience rather than the end.
So, do you think that we will see hundreds or thousands of digital collectible experiences built on top of smart contract platforms over the next couple of years? Like, do you think that there'll be hundreds of companies operating in this space?
Well, not at Ethereum's current scaling capability,
well, okay.
but I mean, I think the appetite is there. I think that the technical barrier to building an audience, given the technical limitations, it's concerning. And you know, I know that everyone in this industry is working really hard to solve the scaling problems. I know that lots of people have different approaches to it, and the Ethereum Foundation is aggressively working on that this year. I think that's going to get cracked. But yes, absolutely. And that's the future I want to see. I want to see dozens of companies producing hundreds of experiences, because, you know, one size does not fit all. And I think that we all love interesting entertainment. And I want for my kids, entertainment options where they have more control and ownership, and they're less likely to have, things that they've invested in, both time and potentially money, sort of, you know, pulled away from them by whether it's malicious action by the publisher, or just ignorance, or just a failure because companies fail. The nice thing about blockchain is that some of these experiences can live on.
So if I made a digital collectibles experience and I gave up on it,
right?
Could some other developer community come along and take that and take it somewhere else, kind of like a fork would be?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we shut everything, all of our infrastructure, our front end for CryptoKitties down tomorrow, it is 100% tractable for someone to maybe with new art, maybe with existing art, build a whole new front end for that and whatnot, and make that happen. Or they could just decide they have a better idea for how to build a front end for CryptoKitties and choose to do that, even if we don't shut down. So once it's on the blockchain, and basically anyone has the same access we do, with the exception of releasing new traits. And so anyone can create a front end for it, and any user can choose any front end, because ultimately they're authenticating their actions directly with the chain, no matter which user interface they're using.
And I think that's probably a great point to end with, which is that what you just said, in my mind, is the essence of what a decentralized application is all about. It's an application that is not tied to a particular developer, right? Like it's something that can live on after the developer has lost interest, or any sort of failure mode can keep going. And that's, I think, is a really optimistic and powerful concept, and one that I think a lot of people in this room probably would agree is an amazing thing. So thank you.
Thank you, Fred.